back in those days, when it comes to adoption and giving up someone, it was easy. There was no paperwork, nothing. They just literally gave me to another couple. I wasn't really never legally adopted. Back then, she went to the orphanage home and produced her identification and showed that the father, natural father, was Jules Brooks, and she just had to sign some papers. My grandmother had set so many examples for me. Anyone that was a minority or had a physical handicap, mentally or whatever, she was always preaching that we're no different than anyone else. She's way ahead of her time, 25, 30 years ahead of her time. To love another person is to see the face of God. I always would tell people, we talk about philosophies, and I always tell people, I said, I have a simple philosophy. And I'd say, it's nice to be nice.
On this week's episode of American Real, we bring you a special Father's Day edition with my dad, my hero, Roger D. Brooks. As the patriarch of our family, my father has lived out a lifelong legacy of kindness and goodness, touching countless lives over his 80 years. Not only is he a family man, but my dad has genuine care for people with an extended network of family and friends that reaches near and far. I have had the honor and privilege of watching and learning from him my entire life as he lives his own by being real, a role model of honesty, integrity, and wholeness. But my father's story doesn't end there. In fact, it's only the beginning. My father is an identical twin, but the twins were separated at birth, adopted and raised more than 1,000 miles apart. My father grew up in Miami. His twin brother, Tony, was raised in upstate New York. As fate would have it, at the age of 25, they would be reunited in a moment of mistaken identity. My dad provides specific details of their story in this episode, some he's never revealed before, about the experience and how it changed the course of his life. After their reunion, the twins were asked to go on countless talk shows and news programs, sharing their story with the world. Eventually, they were asked to be the subject of a book, The Twins Who Found Each Other, documenting the details of their life journey. In addition, they became the subjects of many scientific experiments regarding nature versus nurture, revealing the incredible power of our genetic makeup, no matter our environment. My father always says there's no stronger bond than having a twin. There's no stronger relationship than having an identical twin. He often asked his brother, and his brother often asked him, what would it have been like if they were raised together? They both agreed, saying, it's something we'll never know. That's it. It's something we'll never know. On August 16th, 2016, my father lost his brother to illness, his other half. On that day, he also lost a big piece of his heart. I've been holding back this episode for months, wanting to release it on Father's Day, because to me, the greatest gift I could give anyone is the gift of a person's voice in sharing their story. Welcome to American Real. This is Roger Brooks, and my very special guest today is Roger D. Brooks, co-subject of the book The Twins Who Found Each Other. You and your identical twin, Tony, were separated at birth and were part of the landmark Minnesota Twin Study. You appeared on countless TV shows dating back decades. You were featured in many magazines and books, Life magazine, Reader's Digest, Rolling Stone, the list goes on and on. You are the author of The Special Bus, a children's book you wrote a few years back. You are a man of faith and conviction, and I am so proud to have you as my father and dad. Welcome to American Real.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful introduction. I'm very pleased to be here.
Well, I've been waiting to do this for a couple of months now, and you're not only here because you're my father, you have come by popular demand. I didn't tell you this, but I can't tell you the number of people, both on social media and people that have stopped me in person to say, you have to interview your father. So here we are. We finally did it, and welcome to the studio.
Thank you so much, Roger.
What do you think?
The studio?
Yes.
It's wonderful. I didn't expect it to look like this, because on television it looks so much different, but very, very nice. I like it a lot.
Well, you've been in a lot of studios for many decades, and pleased to have you here. So, look, I don't know where to start, but why don't we just start from the beginning? What were some of your earliest childhood memories?
Well, we were born May 28, 1938, out of wedlock. And my brother Tony was adopted at 6 weeks old. And I was put into an orphanage home. And I was adopted when I was 4.5 years old. We'll jump way ahead now to September of 1962. It's a Jewish holiday called Rosh Hashanah. And my grandmother wanted me to sing in the choir, and I did not want to sing in the choir because I had a date. To me, that was more important. So what she does in her own sneaky way, she calls the rabbi. Now, the rabbi's son and I were the very best friends for well over 65 years. So she calls the rabbi. She says, maybe if you talk to him, he'll sing in the choir. So she calls me. I'm in the other room in the back of the house, and Roger, the rabbi wants to talk to you. I get on the telephone. Yes, Rabbi, how are you? I said, I'm fine. He says, look at Roger. Why don't you do your grandmother this favor? After all, how many more years does she have to live? All right, I'll sing in the choir. The guilt trip, right?
Yeah.
So I sing in the choir. That night, after the services were over, Ray and his wife, Alva, the three of us, we decided to go and have some coffee. Being that I broke a date, I figured let's go on Dixie Highway, across from the University of Miami. There's got to be lots of girls there after all. I just left her. So we went to a pancake house. And in this pancake house, while we were having our coffee, I noticed this busboy kept staring at me and staring at me. And I said, Ray, this busboy keeps looking at me. I don't understand it. And Ray says, don't worry about it. It's nothing. Finally, he starts to approach the table. I says, Ray, he's coming over here. He comes to the table and he looks down at me and he says, Tony Malassi? I says, no, I'm Roger Brooks. He says, you're not Tony Malassi? I says, no, I'm Roger Brooks. He says, my God, I just left Buffalo, New York. I work for this company called the Great Books of the Western World. And I work for this guy that looks exactly like you. As a matter of fact, when you walked in, I heard your voice. Your voice is identical. The way you hold your cup of coffee, it's identical. Well, Ray and I looked at each other, and I knew I had a twin, but I didn't know where. I was in Miami. As far as I know, my twin brother could have been in Idaho, as far as I know. I says, look, this busboy's name was Mark. I says, look, Mark, let me meet you in the morning. You're working now. I have a fantastic story to tell you. Maybe we've hit upon something. I met him the next day, and I made it a point not to tell him how old I was. I thought if I told him, at that time I was 24, I said, if I tell him I'm 24, he will say, Tony's 24. So I gave him some coins, and I says, go into the telephone booth. They had telephone booths in those days. I says, call the office and find out when this Tony Malassi was born. He comes out of the telephone booth and he says, May 28, 1938. And I shook my head. I said, that's when I was born. And he was so excited. He jumped up in the air and he raised his arm up in the air. He says, I knew it. This guy is your twin brother. I says, look at Mark. It's possible. You can look alike. It's very possible. And even be born on the same day and it's not your brother. I said, I need to see a picture of him. If I could see a picture of him, I'll be convinced. No problem. Your brother was a great salesman. He appeared in the Great Books of the Western World publication weekly because he was the outstanding salesman. I have this publication in the dorms. Let's run over there. We hop in the car, we go to his room. He opens up his drawer and he's going all through it and he pulls out the publication and it says, Tony Malassi, photo unavailable. I said, oh, gosh. Mark says, no problem, no problem. Let's hop in the car and we'll go to Fort Lauderdale. They have an office there. So we run down, we get to the Fort Lauderdale's office. We tell the manager this story. He thinks we're a little nuts telling him. But he had a more recent publication, and he brought it out, and there it was, Tony Malassi and his picture. Wow. And I was then convinced that this was my brother. So I knew, how do I get a hold of him?
So we'll get there. If you don't mind, let's
sure.
Because I want to save that for a little bit. Because I want to start with your background, your childhood. I want to know about this orphanage. We never really talked about this. So do you have any memory?
No, I don't really have any memories of the orphanage at all.
Okay. And you were 4 and a half.
I was 4.5 years old. Okay. The biological father, Jules Brooks, his wife, Mildred Brooks, they lived in Syracuse, New York. And this orphanage home was in Utica, New York. And Mildred Brooks had found out what Jules had done. And she knew she had to have me. She said, I want that baby. I want
because
your
twin was adopted.
Yeah, my twin was adopted at 6 weeks old.
Right. Tell us about the fire.
Not much you can tell about a fire because I was 6 weeks, a little bit over 6 weeks old. I was literally given up to a couple that, I don't know why, back in those days when it comes to adoption and giving up someone, it was easy. There was no paperwork, nothing. They just literally gave me to another couple. And it happened shortly after they took me in. When I was in the crib, the story that I hear that either the man or the woman put a cigarette on top of the crib, and I shook the crib, and the crib caught on fire, and I received first-degree burns on my left side.
But you still have the scars today?
I still have the scars to this day, yeah. But thank goodness I don't remember that at all. I was about 7 or 8 weeks old.
So let's talk about Mildred. So Mildred is your biological father's wife, not your biological mother.
That's correct.
She finds out. that you're in an orphanage,
Right.
and this amazing woman adopts you.
Right.
And you grew up in, for the most part, Miami, Florida.
Yeah. When she, of course, when you say she adopted me, back then, I wasn't really never legally adopted. Back then, she went to the orphanage home and produced her identification and showed that the father, natural father, was Jules Brooks, and she just had to sign some papers.
Amazing.
And we moved back to Syracuse. Then shortly after, we moved down to Miami. Now, Mildred had married Jules twice. So after the second divorce, that's when we moved down to Miami. And that was my Mildred, my grandmother, and my half-brother, Rodney. And we moved down to Miami and settled there in 1945.
Okay. All right. So what was it like growing up in the 40s and 50s in Miami, Florida?
It was good. Like I had said in the beginning, my very best friend, Ray Scott, we were inseparable. We're always together. So we would always play baseball or go to the pool or go to the beach or go to a movie. So as far as I was concerned, I had a nice childhood.
But you grew up fairly poor, correct?
Yes, but when you're young, you don't know what poor is.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know I was poor. Actually, one time, there was a time that I went to school without shoes. But I didn't realize it. I didn't realize that. Matter of fact, the teacher took me to a shoe store and bought me these shoes called, I think it was called Buster Brown. And I remember getting those shoes, and when I would go to bed at night, I would put them down beside my bed and wake up in the morning and look at them. But I had a meal every night. And Ray Scott, his family was like my second family. When they went on vacations, I always went along with them. They always counted me in. So I thought it was nice.
Well, you were blessed to have them.
Yes, I was. Very blessed, yeah.
So you mentioned earlier your grandmother asked you to sing in the choir. So this was you at this time you were part of the Jewish faith?
Yes, I wasn't a real, what you would call a pious Jew, but I was of the Jewish faith. My grandmother, when she asked me to sing in the choir, and when the rabbi called me and I agreed to do it, that's when she said to me, "Thank you, my grandson, and someday God will reward you." Well, I was furious. I says, "Oh yeah, sure. How is he rewarding me if I have to break a date?"
Right.
So it was a wonderful experience. My grandmother, when she passed away, shortly after I found my brother, I had said to Tony, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but we can always go back if you need to. I said to Tony, let's go. My grandmother was in the hospital and she was dying. And I says, Tony, let's go to the hospital. I want her to see you. We went up to the hospital and we stood at the back of the bed. And I says, Tony, don't say anything. Let's just stand there and look at her and see if she can tell who's who. And so we went into the hospital room and we stood there and she raised her hand. Her hand was shaking. She says, "You can't fool me. I know my grandson when I see him."
That's great.
Well, it was a very emotional moment.
Yeah.
I went outside, out of the room, and I gathered my thoughts.
So tell us about the special bus.
Wow. When I was 12 and 13, I had to go to a boarding school. My mother had remarried. My grandmother was up there in age, and it was difficult for her to take care of me. So I went to a boarding school for 2 years. But before I went to the boarding school, there was a time when I was sleeping in my bedroom in Miami, and my grandmother came into the bedroom and shook me and says, get up, get up. We have a special bus to catch. And I didn't even hear those words. And I rolled over and I went back to sleep. She came in the second time, a little bit disturbed. She says, get up. We have a special bus we got to catch. So I heard the word special. So that meant something to me. So I quickly got up, got dressed, and we were walking down towards the bus stop, across the 27th Avenue in Miami. And I got to the corner, and I saw my grandmother picking up her pace. I says, Grandma, slow down, slow down. I'll keep the special bus here. Don't worry about it. Bus pulls up, and my grandmother grabs a hold of the railing, and she pulls herself up. And she extends her arm out to the bus driver. He says, I just want to congratulate you. And she turns around and gets off the bus. Now, I am confused. Where is this special bus that we have to catch? So I'm a little bit angry. I was sleeping. My grandmother woke me up. I could have slept longer. I said, Grandma, you told me we're going to catch a special bus. She says, that was a special bus. How is it special? Says, you see, the driver was the first Negro bus driver to be hired by Dade County. Meant nothing to me. Meant nothing to me. I didn't see how that was special, but she wanted me to experience that experience. So I knew that there's something when she said the word Negro, because weekly I would go to the family service. My mother made arrangements to go to the family service to meet with my social worker, and I always sat at the end of the bus because I could get off first. But the Negroes were sitting in the back, and there was no conversation, no talking, no laughing, nothing. Arms crossed and just looking straight ahead. And I said, Grandma, when we're walking back to our house, I said, why is it all the Negroes in the back? They don't talk. They don't laugh. They don't do anything. She says, grandson, she always referred to me as grandson. She says, grandson, I can't answer that now, but someday I will. Time goes by. I'm in school. The teacher comes to my desk, and she says, you need to go home right away. Your grandmother wants you. Well, I was scared. I was afraid that something happened to my grandmother. I quickly ran all the way to my house, which wasn't far from school. It's just about 3 or 4 blocks. And there she was standing in a beautiful blue dress. And she says, quick, take a shower. We're going to see a movie. I said, oh, a movie? What kind of a movie? She says, a baseball movie. I says, baseball? I love baseball. Ray Scott and I always played baseball. So I got dressed, walking towards the bus stop. I said, what's the name of this movie? She says, it's the Jackie Robinson story. I had no idea who Jackie Robinson was. We saw the movie, got out, walking towards the bus, getting ready to go home. She says, tell me, my grandson, what did you get out of this movie? I said, oh, boy, I felt bad for Jackie. His glove had a hole in it. And all the other boys, they had brand new gloves. She says, no, but what message was sent to you? I said, oh, boy, could he run fast. He could steal those bases, and he could hit home runs. He was good. Now she's getting a upset. No, 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 that's not what I want. What did you see in that movie? What happened? And I was disappointed myself because I wasn't giving her what the news that she wanted to hear. I says, well, the fans, they did spit at him. She said, yes. I said, and they called him terrible names. And she said, yes. I says, he wasn't treated like all the other ball players. She says, do you remember when you asked me, we were coming home from going to the special bus? Do you remember you asked me why all the passengers, all the Negroes in the back, they don't talk, they don't have any conversation, they don't laugh, they don't, and I told you someday I will tell you. I says, yeah, I remember that. She says, do you remember their faces? I said, yes, I do. She says, well, that's what Jackie Robinson was going through. And that's what those passengers were going through. Because they were persecuted. People would spit at them, call them names. And she says, I wanted you to remember this for the rest of your life. And to this day, every time I see a bus, I think of a special bus.
So, what role did that play in your life as far as shaping your character?
Well, I always had a soft spot for the I'm trying to think. My grandmother had set so many examples for me. Uh, anyone that was a minority or had a physical handicap, mentally or whatever, she was always preaching that we're no different than anyone else. So I just knew that I never made fun of anyone or called them names or anything like that. She was a strong advocate for liberal rights, and she's way ahead of her time, 25, 30 years ahead of her time. So if that shaped my character, I'm sure she had a lot to do with it.
Yeah. So after your teen years, you go into the military, right? The Air Force. Why did you choose the Air Force?
Good question. My uncle Lou, who was Jules Brooks's brother, and his wife, Mildred, my Aunt Mildred, and their daughter, Diana, they were, in many ways, my salvation. Because I knew Uncle Lou was my father's brother, and I knew I had a bond between my aunt and my uncle, my cousin. And my uncle spent 30 years in the Navy. And when I made the decision that I wanted to go in the military, I was only 17, but I wasn't doing well in school. And as I said before, my mother had remarried, and my grandmother was getting up there in age. And I knew that I had to go on. So a friend of mine, the two of us decided to join the Air Force. I didn't want to go into the Navy. My uncle was disappointed, but I felt if I go in the Navy, I'm going to be stuck on a ship, and I didn't want that. And back then, the motto was, travel in the Air Force, you go all over. So I joined the Air Force for 4 years.
Great. And where were you stationed initially?
Initially, training was at Lackland Air Force Base.
Which is where?
In Texas. Then for training, I went to Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi, Mississippi, I believe. and I studied to be I was a radio operator. I must have done well because when you get when you when you graduate, they give you they ask you put down the places where you would like to go. So I put down Japan, somewhere in the United States, and another base. Well, everyone in our class got Iceland, and I got Japan. And they couldn't understand, why is it that you got Japan, we all got? I don't know. The only thing I could figure that I was a pretty good radio operator. So I went to Johnson Air Force Base out of Tokyo and spent 2 years there.
Tokyo.
In Tokyo, I can tell you the story about when I was in Tokyo.
Sure.
And every Friday, there was another air base that was about 30 miles away from Johnson Air Force Base. And I would get on the bus and go there to where they had Jewish services. Now, I didn't go for the services. I went because of the food. They had bagels. They had lox. They had chopped liver. They had everything that I loved. But while I was in that bus going there was this other, I don't know if he was in the Navy, or the Army, or the Air Force, but there was this military man, and he kept looking at me. And it's obvious that he was feeling good. And he says, I know who you are. I've seen you playing basketball for CYO in Binghamton, New York. I said, not me. I said, I'm from Miami, Florida. Don't tell me. I know someone looks exactly like you. And he played for St. Mary's, the CYO in Binghamton, New York. Well, I knew I had a twin. I found out after when I was 15, and I knew I had a twin. I said, maybe this guy knows who my twin brother is. So I wrote a letter and enclosed a picture of myself and explaining a little bit about my life. I was separated at birth. And I sent the letter to the Assumption of St. Mary's. And about weeks later, I get a brown envelope with a letter in it and some rosary beads. And the letter says, I'm sorry, we can't help, in so many words. I'm sorry, we can't help you, but we know nothing of this Tony Malassi. But enclosed are some rosary beads, and if you pray on the rosary beads, you will find your twin brother. I said, rosary beads? I mean, I just got back that night from having bagels and lox and chopped liver, and they want me to pray on this rosary. And I remember getting the rosary beads. I knew nothing about rosary beads, and I remember flinging them, throwing them, upset. So I went to the chaplain the next day, Rabbi Schwartz, and I explained what had happened. He says, look at Roger. You're in Japan. If this man is your brother, there's nothing you can do about it now. Wait till you get out of the service and do a follow-up. And that's what I did. I did a follow-up.
Interesting. So you told us the story of how you met, but take us back to the first day you met. And look, twins have a special relationship anyway.
Right.
Being separated and then finally connecting after 25 years. What was that moment like?
It was great. It was January 10th, 1963. I was expecting Tony to arrive at the Miami International Airport, and I was going to meet him there. So I had to make an impression on him. After all, he's from New York. Now, when you say Binghamton, New York, I think of New York. So I want to make an impression on them. So Ray Scott and his wife, Alva, the three of us, we go to a men's clothing store, and I buy a sport jacket with the leather patches on the elbows, and I buy a red ascot and put it in, tuck it in. And I went to the airport and bought a New York Times and put it under my arm. trying to act like a New Yorker. So when he gets off the airplane, now I'm hiding behind a pillar because I wanted to see him first. I didn't want him to see me. So when he gets off the airplane, he's walking towards the entrance of the terminal. I come out of the the pillar, and he looks at me and says, "Oh my God!" He's thinking, "What is that?" We approach each other. He puts his arms around me. I put my arms around him, and he says, "Hi, I haven't seen you in 24 and a half years."
That's great.
So we get our luggage.
Were you nervous at the time, though,
No,
when he was coming off the plane?
excited, not nervous, happy, excited.
I mean,
Because before that, we had exchanged, when I said January 10th, it was 3 months before that we were exchanging letters. So trying to get together, trying to make it a possible reunion.
I see. So then continue.
So I had made arrangements, got a hotel room, and I says, "Come on, Tony, let's go to the hotel room. Everyone's anxious to see you, but I want to be with you first. We have a lot of questions to ask each other." So when he's unpacking his belongings, he takes out his aftershave lotion. It was Canoe. I said, "Oh, I have the same thing." And I go into the bathroom and I bring it out and I show him the Canoe. Okay. He takes out his hair lotion, Vitalis. I says, "Oh, I have the same thing." And I go into the bathroom, I bring out the Vitalis and show him. Then he took out his toothpaste. And it's a toothpaste, a Swedish make called Vatamacum. I says, "Tony, I have the same toothpaste." And I go into the bathroom and I show it to him. Vatamacum. We just couldn't get over it. But later we found out, as you said in the beginning, when we did these studies in Minnesota, we learned that identical twins have the same smell, same taste. So we did. So the reason for the Vatamacum, I must have bought it, liked it. He must have bought it, liked it, and we kept it.
It's still remarkable.
Yeah.
So the first day you met, so you're opening up all these belongings and they're the same. Did you feel like you were dreaming? I mean, how could this be possible that you're meeting someone after 25 years?
Yeah. No, not at all. It was real. I knew it was real. No, didn't even cross my mind that this was a dream. This was real. It was, 20, almost 25 years old, and I'm the most excited person on earth at that particular time. No, I loved every moment of it, and we spent. I think Tony spent 2 weeks down in Miami before he went back.
And then you eventually move up to New York, and
Yeah.
and a book is written, and you
Right.
go on a speaking tour. You're
Right.
on all these talk shows.
Right.
That must have been fun.
Yeah, a lot of fun. It was. We had the way it started was that when I had to make a decision. Do I stay down in Miami or move up to Binghamton? I knew that Tony would have to come to Miami, or if I would have to go to Binghamton. We both knew we wanted to be together. The decision was made that I go to Binghamton. My mother, Mildred, was very close to me and didn't want me to go to Binghamton. And I was feeling guilty. But my brother, my half brother, Rodney, had said, "Go to Binghamton. If you don't do it, you will regret it for the rest of your life." That's all I had to hear. And I moved to Binghamton. Well, when I got to Binghamton, a reporter met us and a story broke. And it picked up on AP and UP. And when it picked up, a national show called oh gosh, there were so many shows. Will the real Roger Brooks please stand up? That was do you recall the name of that? Oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank on
That's
that
okay.
show. Anyway, that show went national, and one thing led to another. And the Saturday Evening Post picked up on it. They sent this writer out named Bard Lindeman, and he did a story on us. And then somehow we met up with William Morrow Agency, and a book was written by Tony and I called The Twins Who Found Each Other by Bard Lindeman.
Yeah, and sold quite a few copies, and it's a remarkable story.
Yeah, it did. It did well. Although there was a damper in it, because at that time when the book came out, November of 1969, the Vietnam War was going on, and people just at that time weren't too interested in human interest stories. They were interested in bringing the boys home. And the book didn't do as well as it, although it did well, it didn't do as well as the writer, the author thought it should have done.
Yeah, timing.
Yeah.
So let's talk about you. Let's talk about your convictions. And where did that come from? Where does your strong
Faith?
faith and because now you're Catholic, you grew up Jewish. Is it the same God?
Yeah. When I moved to Binghamton, New York, um, Tony, my brother, introduced me to his cousin, adopted cousin, Nancy Malassi. And we fell in love, and we've been married for 52 years now. But before we got married, Nancy asked me if I would have a problem converting. And I had said in the beginning of this show that I wasn't a pious Jew, and I didn't have a problem converting. Um, so we got married February 27th and been together for 52 years and had two beautiful children.
Oh, I'm sure. But one more question on the religion. So, and seriously, not too many people convert that I know of. So, I want to ask you, because people get so caught up in religion, I think, as far as my God, your God, we're all from the same God, right?
That's correct.
So how do you think about that?
Well, you just got done saying it. We all believe in the same. I mean, the same God. Back then, when I converted, it was a simple process. Today, when you convert, you go through some long meetings. It's nothing that you can convert in an hour or two. And so it was a quick process for me. I learned more about the Catholic religion as time went by with my marriage with Nancy, and the responsibilities and the services and the holidays.
But you experienced both religions. You grew up Jewish.
I grew up Jewish, but there wasn't a bond there. Remember I mentioned that I was in a boarding school for 2 years when I was 13 and 14. And that was a Protestant boarding school. So I had 2 years of being, I think it was Methodist or Baptist. Um, so even before I went to the boarding school, Mount Verde, Florida, outside of Orlando, Florida. It was, the first year was hard. I didn't want to leave Miami. Second year, I liked it. I didn't want to leave. And at that particular time, well, let me just back up a little bit. Before I went into the boarding school, I was going for Hebrew lessons to study to be bar mitzvah, but that never took place because I had to leave for the boarding school. So I was never really tied down to Judaism.
Okay. So let's talk about more of your convictions. What makes you the person you are? You have a big heart. You always put everyone first. Where does that come from?
Roger, I don't know. That's the way it should be.
Yeah.
It should be. I don't know. Maybe when I found Tony, that was probably the best thing that ever happened to me at that time. And I was so much in love with him, and he in love with me. And we had such a strong bond together. Although there were things that we disagreed upon, we never argued once, never had a verbal fight, never. So it was a strong bond. They say there's no stronger bond than being a twin, than being an identical twin. And that is true.
And you guys had something called Twin Talk. Tell us about Twin Talk. What is Twin Talk?
I don't even know how it started. And when I first moved to Binghamton, Tony was showing me all around the triple cities, Binghamton, New York, Johnson City, and Endicott, New York. And back then, IBM was very popular, and on the buildings, if I recall, it had the saying "think," if I remember correctly. And Tony says, "We're going to have our own building, and we're going to call it the Ayataka Ur." I says, "What?" And he made it up. He says, "We're going to call it the Ayataka Ur building." I says, "You forgot something. You have to add the words dinga dinga. Ayataka Ur dinga dinga." Now, we would laugh like a, but if we told anyone this, they would think we're nuts. We did a lot of double talking. It was just, you have to almost be an identical twin to understand why we're talking like that.
Yeah, a lot of good times. So you had 50 plus great years together after you found each other. And my Uncle Tony, your brother, passed last year.
Yes.
And we haven't really talked too much about it.
It was hard. It was hard. Thornton Wilder wrote a book about these fictional twins, Esteban and Manuel. And Manuel, and they were extremely close. Manuel gets married, falls in love, and leaves Esteban. And Esteban is up in his room, sobbing, crying, and hollers out, "I'm alone, alone, alone." That's how I feel. I have good days, bad days.
Yeah, I know it's hard.
You know, when people that you love pass away and you have time to reflect, just like when my grandmother passed away and I was lying in bed and realized that she had said, and someday God will reward you. Well, God rewarded me that night when I discovered about Tony. And so I reflect a lot about Tony. So many wonderful, beautiful memories. Can't take them away.
Right. You think about him a lot?
Every day. Every day. Every day.
Does it make you think about your own death? Do you reflect on
No.
that?
I've always said, and I've told friends of mine that I say it now. I don't know how it's going to happen when I'm getting ready to take my last breath, but I sometimes, it's going to sound weird, but Tony and I talked about this. We would welcome our death because we knew there was something higher than being on this planet. So you ask me, do I fear death? Not at all. Not at all.
What do you think is higher? What comes next?
I don't know, Roger. There's something there. I don't believe in coincidences. It wasn't a coincidence that my grandmother wanted me to sing in the choir that night. I had to break a date, and that led me to the pancake house, led me to the busboy, and he saw something. I followed up on it. I followed up. That was not a coincidence. It was meant to be. And I'm a strong believer in that.
Yeah.
Things happen for a reason. It's meant to be.
Okay, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about one of your favorite subjects. And that is
Baseball.
we certainly could talk baseball. I want to talk about, because you're doing so well on your new lifestyle. I'm not going to call it a diet. Your new lifestyle. You've had a lot of success and a lot of struggle throughout your life, but I think it's an important topic, and I think you can share some good information that you've learned over the years, and you're on a good track right now.
Yeah.
So
Good question.
let's talk about that.
Good question. I've always after 40 years, I started putting on weight after 40 years. So, and so did Tony. And we've been on every imaginable diet that you can think of.
But when you say you started to put on weight, why? Did your lifestyle change dramatically? Was it your body changing? Was it both?
I think.
Do you like food?
Well, remember when I moved to Tony's home, Pauline and Joseph Malassi, and could they cook?
Italians.
Could they? Oh my gosh, they could cook. They had, she had magic in those fingers of hers. And of course, when I married Nancy, her parents are full-blooded Italian from Reggio Calabria. So, yeah, the food was. How can you not? Who doesn't like Italian food? I just at that time probably didn't know when to stop. I liked it so much, so I put on a lot of weight, and I would go on a diet, lose it, go on another diet, lose it. Then, not too long ago, about 3 or 4 months ago, my daughter, your sister, Stephanie, told me about this new diet called ketosis. Um, and she says, Dad, try it. I think you'll like it. It's different than other diets. And it's a type of diet where you eliminate all carbohydrates, all sugars, and concentrate on things that have fat in it. um,
And when you
so
say fat, there's various types of fat, correct?
there's good fats, right? But it even said if you order a prime rib and there's fat on the prime rib, eat it. It's okay to eat it. Fat is good for the ketosis diet. Um, I don't go out and buy fat, but if something has fat on it, I eat it. And it's been very successful, and I love it. And I don't really like calling it a diet. I like calling it, this is it's a plan that
It's a lifestyle, right? It's a
yes, a
lifestyle
new
change.
lifestyle. Yeah. So I've been very successful at it. I've lost well over 26, 27 pounds already, and
Great.
looking forward to losing a lot more. I feel good. I go to the gym 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday, exercise, and
But let's talk about the mindset of eating. Would you consider yourself back, when you were struggling, as a binge eater, as one who loved certain types of food, one who loved sugar, all of the above? What would you say your
are you
challenge came
referring
from?
to when I was growing up?
No, just from the time you were struggling in your 40s, your 50s, your 60s.
Yeah. I wasn't a binge eater. I ate a lot. I probably slowed down um, as far as exercise I didn't exercise as I should, but when I when Nancy and I got married and we started our family, um, I worked for a place called the Susquehanna Valley Home. It was a home for disadvantaged children, and the pay wasn't that good. It was low salary, so I always had extra jobs. Actually, I had at one time, hard to believe, but I had 5 jobs at one time: cleaning bathrooms, cleaning offices, working in a fruit stand. I was a city councilman for 8 years, and then my regular job working at Susquehanna Valley Home. So when I say I didn't do a lot of exercise, but I'm doing a lot of movement in all these jobs, so that sort of kept my weight down. Um, but I was always a big eater. I was always a big eater, and but this ketose diet, you don't need to be a big eater. I get satisfied very quickly. I'm never hungry, always full.
So what advice do you have for people that may be struggling?
I think it depends on the circumstances, what person and how the person is struggling. They can be struggling in so many ways. They can be struggling mentally, physically, emotionally. Um, but I would suggest if they're having a problem with, if they consider themselves obese, I would suggest counseling. Um, my mother, Mildred, when we moved down to Miami, the first thing she wanted to do was me to go to a social worker. She thought it was important for me to have counseling because I didn't have a father figure. And I went 5 years for counseling. It was the best thing that she ever thought of that I needed. So anybody that's struggling with a weight, they're suffering inside. I can understand it, but they need support either from their friends or their family, someone to support them and say, "Let me help you. Let's set up some counseling or whatever I can do. I want you to know I'm there."
Right. And with this new lifestyle change, do you feel you've been educated more about food? Is it important for people to really start to look at labels, to care about the type of food, even the type of meats you buy. I mean, because you could get low grade meats, you could get higher grade meats,
Right.
you know, organic. So have you tried to educate yourself more this time than in the
Yes.
past?
Yes. I never looked at labels before. Labels weren't important to me. I didn't care about carbohydrate. I could eat all the pasta I wanted, or rice, or potatoes, anything that had carbohydrates. But now I'm more aware of what I'm eating. When I go out to eat, I know not to have the bread or have pasta as a side dish, or rice. Um, so even when I go to the store, if I pick up something, I will look at the contents and the labels and what it contains, how many grams of sugar, how many grams of carbohydrates.
Right. Um, you mentioned the Susquehanna Valley home, and I remember that place as a child, and actually remember having you bring some of the kids over to our house and interacting with them.
Right.
Um, that was a special place, and um, you stayed in social work for quite a long time.
Right. Right.
How did the Susquehanna Valley home
Come about.
impact your life? And I know there's still some of those kids that keep in touch with you
That's correct.
all these
Yeah.
years later. So it must
Yeah.
have been a special place.
Yeah. Susquehanna Valley home came into my life, and my brother and I had a store called the Twin Market, and it wasn't very successful, so it had to close up, and I needed a job. And I was told about an opening for a recreation director at the Susquehanna Valley home, and I applied for that position. I got it. Now the home consisted of 72 children between the ages
Okay.
of 6, 7 years old up to 18. And they were predominantly all African American children. Um, Perhaps it was the best job I ever had. I just bonded with those kids and just loved them. It's just, you see that. I think you asked me about my struggles. I didn't have struggles. They had the struggles. I could see it in their faces. They didn't have a mother or a father or an uncle or an aunt to go to. Susquehanna Valley home was their life. It was their home. So I bonded with a lot of those kids. And I'm going back 40 years ago. To this day, I still receive calls and speak to them. And so it was a wonderful, wonderful job.
And some of your best friendships stemmed from there as well, right? That people like Al Traeger
Yeah.
and Dan Dowd
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
you
sure.
stay in touch with today.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of the house parents for the cottages. My good friend Al Traeger, and he was each. There were cottages. There were 6 cottages with 12 kids at each cottage, so the population was 72 children, and Al had the young ones, and he was just a great house parent and had a wonderful feeling for children. And to this day, Al and I are perhaps he is my best friend. And when he got married, I walked his grandmother down the aisle.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Tell us about one of the kids or two. I know you recently went to Attica because
yeah,
one of them is in prison, right?
yeah, I'm getting ready to go again next month. The young man name we'll just say his name is Tony, which it is. He grew up at Susquehanna Valley home, and you always you always realize who's going to make it and who's not going to make it, and
Based on
based on based on living there and going to school and
observing them.
right. So we all the staff and everyone said that this Tony, he's going to make it. He's going to do great. So he graduated, went into the military, got an honorable discharge, um, lived in Manhattan, New York, and got tied up with drugs. And one thing led to another, and he killed one of the drug users, or I don't know if they were swapping money or what it was, and he went to prison for it. So my friend, good friend, Bill DeLorme and I, we try to go at least 3 times, 4 times a year to Attica to visit him. He's 55 years old now. He's going to be 55 next month, and we want to go there for his birthday. And I don't know if you've ever been to a prison, but visit a prison, but
No.
everyone, it's hard. It's hard when you walk to those doors, those gates, and but we go because Tony that we're visiting, it made his day, his week, his month. He looks forward to those visits and always writes us thanking us for coming to visiting him. So it's a wonderful feeling that you can make someone that's never going to get out, probably. He may get out when he's 69, 70 years old, but making him feel special. And that's what we try to do.
Yeah. Anyone else come to mind that keeps in touch with you?
Yeah, I have the book that I wrote, The Special Bus. At the end, there's a picture of me and one of the kids that grew up there. He's a young man now today. His name is Eric, and he has a twin sister, Erica, and they have a sister named Stephanie, and Stephanie calls me every so often, maybe 3 or 4 times a year. There's a couple of the kids that are grown up. They live here in Binghamton, and I bump into them once in a while.
Nice. Any regrets in your life?
I don't regret anything. No. Why? Why have regrets? No.
Okay, let's talk a little baseball.
Well, baseball, I grew up as in football. I was a Dolphin fan, and because I didn't live in New York, and they didn't have back then, they didn't have a professional baseball team back then. But when I moved to Binghamton, I quickly, because Tony was a Yankee fan, and I quickly became a Yankee fan, diehard Yankee fan.
But before that, wasn't it the Dodgers?
Yes, down in Miami, I was a Dodger. You got to remember the movie I saw, the Jackie Robinson story, that made me become a Dodger fan. And I know everything about Jackie Robinson.
And then when you moved up to New York, you switched teams and became a Yankee fan.
Yeah, not right away. Not right away, though. Because the Dodgers at that time were playing in Brooklyn, New York, Ebbets Field. And then they moved to L.A., and that sort of put a damper in it, and I became a diehard Yankee fan.
What is it about baseball that you like so much?
Well, I think the beginning, Roger, is that when I saw the Jackie Robinson story, I think that drew me into baseball. And also that my good friend Ray Scott and I, we would go to the empty lots in Miami and just hit baseballs. I'd hit it, and
the sandlots.
Yeah, sandlots. Yeah. There was one time they had this. They had this batting cage, and if you hit out in the center field, left field, they had a big loop. It was like aluminum foil, and if you hit the ball through that aluminum foil, you would win the prize. So myself, Ray, and another friend, we went, and I hit the ball, and it went through the aluminum foil. and it was $130 that I won.
That's
And
a lot of money back then.
And I remember dividing it up
Oh, that's
and
great.
giving each of. So we came with a third. So
Neat.
yeah.
So one of your special talents is being a lector. For many years, you were a lector, and today you actually are doing some teaching, where you're teaching others how to lector. And how's
Yes.
that going?
It's going well. I meet with her once a week. It's a nun, Sister Teresa. She's from Kenya, Africa. And I received a call from a family member. Would I be willing to come to the church and work with her English? And I said, I'll be glad to do it. So I meet with her every Thursday, and we practice her reading. And I'm still having a hard time. She has a hard time. See, in their alphabet, they didn't have the letter R. So she had a hard time saying the word, W-O-R-D. And it will always come out wad. I said, no, sister, it's word. And she'd start laughing and I start laughing. But what we're doing now, because she wants to do a reading in church, but she wants to make sure that she's understood. And I work with her on this particular reading that she's going to do November 19th. And she's going to do an amazing job. She's a wonderful, and you asked me about my life and all that. And I'm not even going to go into her life because we've got so much in this country. We're blessed. I'm blessed to believe in living in the United States of America.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, we've talked about a lot. Is there anything else that we missed that is important to you?
No, I don't think so. We covered a lot. I'll probably think of something after this is over and say, why didn't I discuss that? But no, we covered a lot, Roger.
Well, I know the producer, so maybe we could have you back. All right, one last question
Yes.
before I let you go. What do you want your legacy to be?
Oh, gosh. Oh, gosh. I never even thought about that. I always would tell people, we talk about philosophies. And I always tell people, I said, I have a simple philosophy. And I'd say, it's nice to be nice.
So you'll leave it there. Just be nice. No, it's a great lesson.
Yeah.
It's a great lesson. Well, this has been great. I was waiting months and months to do this. I'm so glad we did it.
I am too, Roger.
And I can't wait to air this and share this with the world. So thank you.
Thank you, Roger. If I just want to add something quickly, because you said, is there anything you want to add? One of my favorite musicals is Les Miserables.
Yes.
And one of the last lines in that musical, to love another person is to see the face of God. So with that, it's nice to be nice, and I love you very much.
I love you too. Thanks a lot. Thanks for being on our American Real show.
Yes, it's an honor.